Story 1. Sadly, until Republicans start saying it, it is almost meaningless. The only legal way to stop the madness is with a veto-proof supermajority. Story 2. When the richest country in the history of mankind, which controls the flow of money for the entire world because of its long-standing consistency and reliability, decides it no longer wants to be consistent or reliable, it is essentially self-destructing. We were the most prosperous because of our soft power and allied trade partners. It makes sense that when you undermine that soft power and throw your allies into chaos, you will suffer major economic losses. This is basic economics and, honestly, common sense. It is not a big mystery. It is not a wait-and-see situation. Every single time this has been attempted, it has failed spectacularly. Because obvious reasons. Story 3. When Germany voted for the Nazis, it was during a period of significant economic turmoil. America is currently facing intense debates regarding transgender issues. Story 4. Khanna here. The average tariff rate now is 22.5%, the highest since 1909. People are wondering why I am using the word inane to describe it. Story 5. Since Smoot-Hawley, you could make a case for the Iraq War, but that was at least not the same as engaging in a game of chance with a gold-plated 1911 firearm. Story 6. Most self-destructive, wealth-destroying policy any administration has undertaken in modern American history so far. There are still over 3 years to go. Story 7. Liberation Day lasted less than a week. He just announced a 90-day pause on tariffs. It seems his billionaire friends purchased what they wanted, allowing him to tweet to influence the market. How is this not market manipulation? Story 8. Sounds about right. Unfortunately, the Republicans are a party engaged in contradictory beliefs and will act as Trump's authority on truth, proclaiming it a triumph. Story 9. It is possibly tied for first with the Iraq War. Beyond that, it is difficult to identify a more self-destructive single policy, even when considering many decades of history. Story 10. And grass is green. We knew Donald would make mistakes, but I am impressed by how poorly he has performed in such a short time. Story 11. I am tired of people posting the first news headline they read for the day in AskReddit with, "What do you think?" added at the end. Story 12. Well, Democrats stating facts only seems to help convince Republicans that the opposite must be true, which is partly why we ended up with a 6-time bankrupt, convicted felon, and sexual assault perpetrator in office. Story 13. The moves today have convinced me this is part of a scheme to inflate and deflate market value. Announce tariffs, crash the market, buy assets, announce a pause on tariffs, and sell. Announce tariffs are back, crash the market, and repeat the cycle. Story 14. With all the cryptocurrency announcements, they are disregarding his proclamations and running away from his promises and policies. They are manipulating the entire United States economy, and by extension, the global economy. Story 15. It's not just Trump's tariffs. It's the Republicans' tariffs. The Republicans control every branch of government, and the Republican Congress could have stopped the tariffs the day they were announced. It is literally Congress's power, and they are letting Trump proceed with it. But this is what Republican voters chose. Story 16. If you take Trump's word about the United States taking in $2 billion a day in tariffs, it will take 15 years to break even on the $11 trillion in market capital that was lost. Story 17. It is true, and it is important that someone in Congress is stating it, even if the truth is a minority position. Story 18. Hey Reddit, what are your thoughts on the criticism of Trump? Can we avoid having 2 of these discussions every day? Story 19. It is one of the most self-destructive policies in history. Recessions, depressions, economies, and nations collapsing are usually due to a country, economy, or group of people overextending themselves. I believe this is the first time in history that someone has intentionally damaged a country or its economy. Story 20. I bet Trump and his family made billions. This was clear market manipulation. Just an hour before he announced a 90-day suspension of tariffs, he advised his followers to buy stock. And in 90 days, we get to do all of this again. Fun, isn't it? Story 21. I think I'm getting tired of every single day someone posting in AskReddit the exact same thing over and over again. Trump just insert thing here. How do you feel about that? Someone reacted to Trump's policies with insert statement here. What do you think? We have a subreddit for news for a reason. Story 22. The problem is we have had 4 years of Republicans saying those exact words every time the Biden White House bought a stapler. Republicans have exaggerated so much over the years that now, when these words are actually needed, it makes both Democrats and Republicans look equally bad. There is nothing true we can say about them that they haven't already misrepresented about us. Story 23. And for what? That's the one I'm hung up on. To bring manufacturing jobs back to a country with a labor shortage that is intent on deporting more people. Did anyone think this through? Story 24. He is correct. It is foolish. Why is Trump provoking conflicts with our largest trading partners and closest allies? Why isn't the rest of the Republican Party intervening to hold him accountable? He is jeopardizing our international standing over petty personal grievances, while the Republican Party is passively allowing this to happen. Story 25. The last time a blunder of this magnitude occurred was 100 years ago, culminating in the Great Depression. It cost the Republican Party control of the Senate and House for about 60 years. This statement is true. Story 26. Yes, but I need to increase the font to a size that can be seen on the moon. When you examine the details of taxation and trade effects, there are several ways tariffs can be detrimental. It is an extremely ineffective tool to use, especially in the manner Trump is employing them. Story 27. Anyone want to compare the current situation to Smoot-Hawley's immediate consequences and adjust for overall volume and inflation? Because obviously more money has been lost this time than during the entire Great Depression. Story 28. The worst decision ever made by any president will not hurt the exporter. It hurts the importer, which costs American consumers more money. We import a significant amount of food, clothing, and electronics. Countries are not obligated to buy from us, and many will no longer allow American products into their markets. Story 29. I believe we should make Congress stop this. We need to oppose the tariffs. He is going to harm us, and he knows it. He doesn't care. Story 30. Well, Cittadini just reversed all of them except against China. Whiplash is not conducive to economic growth, and the world has learned you can't trust his decisions. They could all be back on tomorrow. Story 31. Representative Khanna's statement aligns with numerous economic analyses. The tariffs have resulted in higher costs for U.S. consumers and businesses. Analysts predict a decline in gross domestic product by up to 0.8%, job losses exceeding 600,000, and potential increases in unemployment to recessionary levels. Tariffs have destabilized markets, with the Standard & Poor's 500 dropping significantly. This situation has caused broad economic harm, higher prices, reduced trade efficiency, and strained international relations. Khanna's critique reflects widespread concerns about the far-reaching negative impacts of these policies. Story 32. I am surprised that what Trump is saying is actually happening. Where are the checks and balances? Is there no protocol when a president goes rogue? Story 33. Republicans need to reclaim their principles and take action. The current leadership is damaging the country. They should distance themselves from the extreme factions and return to traditional conservative values. Story 34. It's not wealth destroying. It's wealth transferring. The aim is to move it away from the middle class and into the upper class. This is literally the goal of everything he does. Story 35. I think it doesn't matter until people with an R next to their name on the ballot start voicing these concerns. Story 36. Depends. Is it as of now? No. That is still the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930 that helped worsen the Great Depression. There was also a limit placed on the expansion of the money supply and gold sterilization, which essentially removed the effect of gold inflows and outflows on the money supply from 1937 to 1938. This led to a significant drop in GDP of around 10% and unemployment climbed to 20%. But if this continues for a while, yes, it definitely has a chance to be worse since the United States relies much more on global trade now. Story 37. She really forgot about nearly all the COVID policies. This is not a partisan issue. The entire political system made significant mistakes at great cost. Story 38. The United States has been facing challenges in trade for decades. Between losing our manufacturing sector, encountering higher tariffs abroad, and funding other countries' defense budgets, I understand the need to pull back for our own sake. However, I am not sure a full-scale global trade war is the solution to these issues. It has caused a lot of panic and uncertainty in the markets, as well as among the public. That being said, public opinion is influenced by the media. Social media acts as a source of misinformation. The truth is often obscured, making it difficult to predict how this will unfold in the long term. The short-term outlook appears to be one of upheaval. I only hope this situation urges China to reconsider its approach and prompts the United States and the European Union to reassess their self-sacrificing paths in both foreign and domestic policies. Change is needed. Story 39. It is a significant transfer of wealth from the middle class to the ultra-rich. It is not detrimental for them. It is an opportunity to acquire assets at a fraction of their value. Remember who their associates are. Story 40. The original poster has a questionable posting history. If this is not a deceptive campaign, then they truly need to take a step back. Story 41. It is the most self-destructive and wealth-destroying policy any administration has undertaken in modern American history. Trump still has more than 3 years left to surpass himself. Story 42. Who knew a repeat offender with a triple-digit waistline and a double-digit IQ, who could run a casino in New Jersey, also cannot manage the largest economy in history? Story 43. It has been totally fair to the United States all these years. We have been exporting wealth while the Chinese steal intellectual property from us. Mexico, total trade of $776 billion, with a trade deficit of $157.2 billion. Canada, total trade of $699.6 billion, with a trade deficit of $54.8 billion. China, total trade of $532.4 billion, with a trade deficit of $270.4 billion. Japan, total trade of $208.9 billion, with a trade deficit of $62.6 billion. Germany, total trade of $217.1 billion, with a trade deficit of $76.4 billion. South Korea, total trade of $180.8 billion, with a trade deficit of $60.2 billion. Vietnam, total trade of $136.5 billion, with a trade deficit of $113.1 billion. United Kingdom, total trade data not specified in the provided sources. India, total trade data not specified in the provided sources. Taiwan, total trade of $144.9 billion, with a trade deficit of $67.4 billion. Story 44. Trump doesn't care. He's planning to hide in Greenland with all his friends and live it up like Scrooge McDuck. Story 45. I would have added a few more superlative adjectives with strong emphasis, most profoundly foolish in particular, but the main idea is sufficient. Story 46. I believe this administration is attempting to create a larger group of low-income workers. They aim to remove immigrants and compel the newly impoverished to take their jobs. It is important to revive manufacturing so that our parents and grandparents can work in industries like textiles, producing sneakers and t-shirts for global distribution. Rather than staying home and receiving Social Security, our elderly could engage in factory jobs, allowing the extremely wealthy to maintain their influence over the system for their own gain. We will be too occupied with the struggle for survival to mount any resistance. Story 47. Reagan's policies were the most destructive overall, but in terms of completely foreseen and direct impacts from actions, Trump's tariffs are significant. Story 48. There have been many terrible policies in American history, but this one ranks among the worst and is predictably disappointing, given that we have seen similar situations before. Story 49. The most frustrating thing about this situation is that even in the best-case scenario of Republican voters recognizing their mistake, we still waste another 4 years during which we could be building our economy and infrastructure with new and greener technology, magnetic levitation trains, universal pre-kindergarten, and grants to train and hire more teachers and nurses. This is holding our Earth back from becoming what it could be. Story 50. Tariffs were never about helping workers. They were simply a form of nationalism for billionaires while regular people face high prices for basic goods. Story 51. Similar arguments were presented when the free trade movement emerged in the early 1990s. Both periods were disruptive for the US economy. Story 52. This isn't even a genuine discussion. This is a poorly veiled attempt at pushing an anti-Trump agenda using every available platform. The platform is an obviously curated opinion space. 0 posts criticizing Biden would have been allowed on 99% of the forums until his cognitive decline became evident to everyone. Then 0 criticism of Kamala was allowed. However, on every forum, anti-Trump propaganda is permitted and likely even coordinated and artificially inflated. A reckoning will come, and it can't come soon enough. Story 53. The most may be a stretch, especially since the full numbers are not yet in. However, it seems fair to at least place it on the short list of the most self-destructive and wealth-destroying policies in modern American history, even at this early date, and it is likely the quickest to do so. This still does not make Moscow or Beijing worthy of power. Story 54. I think Mango Mussolini and his Mango minions are enriching themselves at the expense of the entire United States. Story 55. Wealth destruction for the poor is evident, but the wealthy will benefit significantly once this situation is resolved. Story 56. It doesn't matter. Democrats could present all the proof and evidence in the world, and the supporters of former President Trump wouldn't care. They probably won't even feel the full effects of the damage until the next president is elected, and if that happens to be a Democrat, they'll just blame everything on them. Story 57. They are completely wrong. Large corporations and individuals with billions will purchase at the lowest point, and when others have their fill, the market will recover, and they will be holding millions of shares they acquired at a discount. Now is the time to buy. Story 58. Objectively true. The booming economy is turning to dust. Over $11 trillion in lost market value and lost wealth. Employment is about to crash, and new job openings have significantly declined. There are broad, vicious attacks on key allies. We live in extraordinary times. Story 59. This presidency has firmly placed us in the same situation that Germany faced when Hitler became chancellor. He was a populist leader who provided the German people with basic needs while eroding their personal rights. Trump is doing the same to us. The only ones who benefit from this man's existence are his wealthy friends who constantly admire him. Story 60. I believe I do not care what any politician says. Many of them are complicit and putting on an act for the media. The Democratic Party could have easily stopped Donald Trump before he became a significant figure. They repeatedly chose not to because they valued their donors over the working-class voters they claim to represent. Until any politician shows me otherwise, I assume they are complicit individuals who lack integrity. Story 61. Please set aside any misunderstandings and try to comprehend tariffs. Story 62. McKinley and Hoover did not directly cause their economic crashes, which is debatable. In 1893, Argentina and agriculture were factors, with the final straw being the McKinley tariff. In 1929, overproduction in agriculture and fear, as expressed by Babson, contributed to the crash. The Hawley-Smoot tariff was just another final straw. Their administrations did not take action to help, and tariffs were not the only reason for the economic issues. Therefore, it is fair to say that Trumpelstiltskin managed to turn around a relatively healthy economy by himself. Story 63. To be fair, the billionaires and elite politicians will become very wealthy buying properties, stocks, and commodities at rock-bottom prices while most of us lose our livelihoods. Story 64. I didn't vote for this. Did any of you? We the people need to take our country back from these individuals. Story 65. I borrowed this from someone else on Reddit. Apologies to that person. Tariffs are a tax. They voted to tax themselves. Here is my small addition. Interestingly, they did so while the sign in their yard said, Trump low taxes, Kamala high taxes. Story 66. I believe he is correct. Anyone who has taken an economics course understands that this is practical suicide. Countries are selling United States bonds rapidly, which will likely harm the United States for decades and make future trade difficult to achieve in a positive manner. Story 67. The problem here is that one man is responsible for this mess. The point of a democracy is to have a body of public representatives craft laws on a committee basis, allowing for multiple inputs and generally resulting in laws that do not make drastic changes to the country. With Trump, we have a single tyrannical leader who can make policies based on his own whims, without considered input from experts or representatives. This serves as a textbook example of why dictatorships do poorly, as a single person rarely possesses the intelligence and knowledge to make good decisions for a complex society. For instance, Putin chose to invade Ukraine based on multiple flawed assumptions. If there had been genuine public representation in Russia, he might have been restrained. Story 68. Like most Americans, I cannot afford to buy the dip, so I cashed out and refinanced my house to invest in plastics. Once I succeed, I plan to relax and enjoy life. Story 69. Well, no. At some point in the future, there will be more wealth. It will just be concentrated in the hands of fewer people than it is now. Story 70. Representative Khanna, on the House floor, just called Trump's tariffs the most self-destructive, wealth-destroying policy any administration has undertaken in modern American history. What do you think? What do I think? Surkov and Putin won an information war against the United States since March 2013. At the NATO summit in Wales last week, General Philip Breedlove, the military alliance's top commander, made a bold declaration. He stated that Russia is waging the most remarkable information warfare campaign we have ever seen in the history of information warfare. This was somewhat of an understatement. The new Russia doesn't just engage in petty disinformation, forgeries, lies, leaks, and cybersabotage usually associated with information warfare. It reinvents reality, creating mass hallucinations that then translate into political action. Story 71. I believe that when Russia stated at the BRICS summit that they were creating a world order centered around the United States as the primary hub for financial markets, they expected to use their intelligence asset, Donald J. Trump, to make it happen, and he has been delivering. These tariffs will cause the financial markets of the world to seek a more stable alternative, and BRICS will aim to fill the void. Putin must be proud of his political plant and the supporters that follow him. Story 72. She is not wrong. He is manipulating the entire American economy for personal gain. It is a significant scam. He needs to be impeached and prosecuted. He is acting against the interests of our country. Story 73. It is clearly evident that Trump is once again going back on his word, which is proof that not only do they not know what they are doing, but it also seems likely they are causing chaos deliberately for their own interests. Story 74. Trump is like a doctor who intentionally poisons his patient, then at the last minute provides an antidote to save the victim, only to proclaim he is the best doctor and expects people to cheer for him. Story 75. The most purposeful, destructive, wealth-destroying policy any administration has undertaken in modern American history. Story 76. Wealth-destroying? What are you talking about? These tariffs are going to make Trump and his associates wealthy when they buy the dip and then stop the tariffs, causing the stock market to rise again. Trump and his friends are the only ones who deserve any wealth because they are going to fix this country and make it a country that aligns with their values again, even though it has never been a particularly Christian nation. The United States is not mentioned in the Bible, and Jesus actually rebukes the wealthy. But who cares about all of that? Story 77. Market manipulation occurred, and I made some cash. If you did not see this coming, you may have been unaware. Remember, we invade Mexico on the 20th. Story 78. Someone mentioned that Trump might be trying to cause a crisis that allows him to activate emergency powers. With those in place, he can remove obstacles that prevent him from remaining president. He doesn't have a phantom enemy that he can just generate, but he does have control of enough of the U.S. political landscape that he can attempt to pull a Palpatine. Story 79. Going to war with ourselves was not much better, but this is certainly the dumbest thing in any of our lifetimes. Story 80. Trump is weak. Either impose the tariffs and face the consequences, or do not impose them at all. He lacks courage. Story 81. It is a deceptive scheme for loyal supporters of Trump. He will revise his policies when he believes they are prepared to purchase assets. Story 82. My retirement account has lost about 16% of its value in the last month. About $200,000 just disappeared because of an ill-advised tax increase. My retirement was up 24% under President Biden. It took former President Trump 1 month to wipe most of that out. This administration is not just incompetent. They are reckless and ignorant as well. I just completed a couple of economics classes as part of my degree, and even I knew this trade war was misguided and a disaster in the making. Story 83. Well, I can't speak to all the different policies in modern American history, but this has to be the dumbest situation I've seen in my lifetime. I can understand wanting to renegotiate international trade deals. That makes sense, but it requires knowledge and skill in international diplomacy and economics, which Trump does not possess. Instead, starting an unprompted trade war is absolutely insane. Honestly, I view it as an act of treason, along with many other impeachable offenses he has committed at this point. Restore our rights. Restore our checks and balances. Get this individual out of the White House. Story 84. Evening the tariff playing field is self-destructive. Tell that to the over 70 nations that are lining up to come to the table. It's all about deception and scare tactics from the left. We can see right through it. Story 85. It destroys wealth for people who cannot afford to buy the dip and sell a stock for whatever price it reaches when the former president pauses or rescinds the tariffs. Those who can afford to flip stocks like this only become richer while everyone else has to worry about their retirement. Story 86. Yes, that is a pretty accurate description. There are other poor decisions that have led to wealth destruction, but very few where the consequences were so apparent and obvious. Another example is Ulysses S. Grant releasing government gold on Black Friday and causing the economy to collapse in 1869. It seemed clear that this outcome would occur before he made that decision. Story 87. If the plan was to implement them over the long term, yes, but it seems they are more of a tactic to encourage countries to come to the negotiating table. Story 88. I would argue that the inconsistent tariffs represent the largest insider stock market manipulation in history. Look at the fluctuations occurring. Story 89. It is difficult to dispute this, but I believe Republicans will mock Khanna's appearance, which will be their only defense, as usual. I cannot recall the last time a Republican debated the facts instead of focusing on superficial issues. Story 90. It is all a scheme by Trump to control the stock market and engage in insider trading to make significant profits. No one trusts us anymore. Story 91. I believe we need a guideline for labeling posts titled, "What do you think?" regarding the most recent political events as low effort. Story 92. Why are we receiving these repetitive, low-effort questions voted to the main page every day? Story 93. So she is against Kamala Harris's demand that the Republicans do something about the tariffs? To be fair, she said this more than 10 years ago. Story 94. I think many Democratic and Republican congressmen and congresswomen made significant profits by buying this dip. However, that information is unlikely to be made public. Story 95. Definitely true, not to mention isolating us from the rest of the world. Soon we will only have friends that we never wanted anyway. Story 96. I wish they were as upset about the secret police disappearing citizens, but let's have a broad resistance. Story 97. First, he said they were calling to seek his approval, crying and begging for the opportunity to talk to him. Now, he states they have reached out for discussions. So, the crying, begging, and flattery was just a foolish person with a microphone speaking. Why is he so poor at managing the economy this term and last if he is the world's greatest businessman? Because he is a skilled salesman, not a great businessman, and you cannot run global economies on simple ideas, broken promises, and outdated sales tactics. He cannot outlawyer the world, which was his only advantage in the United States by hiding behind our courts. Therefore, he is doomed to fail from the start and will continue to take all of us with him. This is far from over, And we will see how severe the next downturn is when everyone realizes he has no plan to recover all the money he has taken from average Americans. Story 98. It's not a bug. It's a feature. He wants this. I do better in bad markets. Story 99. This subreddit has, for the past 3 months, been filled with discussions about political topics. How do you feel about recent actions taken by former President Trump? I think it's bad. Story 100. Not the extremely low interest rates that force people out of saving and into the stock market and real estate. Story 101. The staffing cuts are designed to reduce the operating costs of government. The tariffs are intended to provide a revenue stream to replace the revenue that billionaires would have paid if the tax reform package was enacted. You may recall that during the campaign, Trump mentioned that one of his priorities was making the 2017 tax cuts permanent. The public will ultimately pay for the tax cuts benefiting billionaires. Remember, Trump stated that the tariffs are permanent. Story 102. I lost 10% of my wealth so far for no fundamental reason, other than some individual who thinks he has a good idea. He doesn't get to claim victory for a 10% loss. That is not winning. Story 103. It is a scheme for him and his associates. He even went on his platform to inform people that it is a good day to buy, then paused the tariffs. Essentially, this is all to manipulate the markets for personal gain. Story 104. Then why are they all coming to the table to negotiate? The 90-day window is because they have agreed to negotiate. Story 105. So this person from California who identifies as a Democrat thinks he knows anything about adult matters. Story 106. I wonder how many people here who agree with him couldn't bring themselves to vote for the corporatist candidate Hillary Clinton or the controversial politician Kamala Harris. Story 107. I think wealth upward distribution would be more accurate than destruction. Check on who knew the decline was coming and who truly benefited. Story 108. To be fair, it's not destroying wealth for everyone. Many people likely sold off their investments earlier and bought back before today's bounce, knowing that the tariffs were going to be paused for 90 days. So it might not be entirely accurate to say it is universally destroying people's wealth. Some individuals are doing quite well. To be honest, it's not just that. It is the transfer of wealth from the hardworking individuals in their 9-to-5 jobs, who see a portion of their income go into pensions and retirement funds, to the insiders who, armed with foreknowledge, take advantage of the situation. Story 109. I disagree. These tariff moves are generating significant wealth for Donald Trump and his wealthy associates who are manipulating the market and profiting from insider trading. Story 110. I think he is testing how he can cause dissent almost instantly. It is a good way to declare martial law and maintain power. He has just discovered another dangerous tool. Story 111. I think it is strange that Republicans support tariffs while Democrats oppose them. This contrasts with historical reactions to tariffs. Additionally, leftists on Reddit often oppose globalization and business owners. I do not support tariffs. I never have. It seems the Republican Party is currently taking a pause on them. I guess we will see where this leads. Story 112. I think he would say that about Trump ordering a pizza and receive the same amount of praise for doing so. Story 113. Looking at our individual retirement accounts and 401k plans, I wonder how people who retired earlier this year feel about their money just disappearing. I imagine not good. Story 114. He is mistaken. Tariffs and recessions benefit the wealthy, whom Donald Trump represents. After every recession, the top 1% become richer because they can acquire assets at a lower cost. Recessions serve as yard sales for the affluent. Story 115. I think Khanna should have attended the vote to have Elon Musk testify before Congress instead of being uncooperative. Story 116. This situation seems intentional. I believe it is an obvious attempt to lower stock prices and make the wealthy even richer. We all know the person in charge has never done anything for anyone but himself and never will. When he called my father a fool and a failure for sacrificing his life for this country, he revealed everything I needed to know about him. Story 117. My opinion is that it is the most self-destructive and wealth-destroying policy any administration has undertaken in modern American history. Story 118. I think Roe is insincere. He has such a weak character and only stands up when the majority of people see the obvious. I've seen him on Mars several times and can't stand that he is such a sycophant. It's embarrassing. Story 119. I think Khanna is cowardly and makes big performances when it is easy or obvious to do so. But when he is needed to stand up for something like voting to subpoena Elon Musk, he hides and claims ignorance. Story 120. Khanna is a Democrat, so it should be no surprise they oppose what Trump is doing. I doubt there will ever be a Democrat who sides with anything Trump does. Story 121. I believe that Reddit would be a better platform if posts like this required disclosures about the authors. While I agree that the statement is absolutely correct, I also think that political astroturfing should be disclosed. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.